Welcome back. Well, as we heard earlier, increasing water scarcity is fueling conflict in Chile. But the struggle for control of the world's most precious resource is by no means confined to South America. From London, Sam Al-Shahat has more.
Privatization is often a politically sensitive issue. But when a basic resource such as water is placed at the mercy of market forces, controversy is sure to follow, as we saw earlier in Chile. And yet, with water becoming an increasingly scarce commodity, is private ownership the only alternative? And if so, what are the consequences for the world's poor? Joining me to discuss this is the Latin American director at the Business and Human Rights Resource Center, Mauricio Lazala. Thank you so much for coming in. I mean, what we're seeing here is privatization gone completely crazy. How could humanity's most basic resource, water, be traded like a good in Chile?
Certainly during the 90s, we saw a huge wave of privatization all over Latin America, not only water, but other utilities as well, energy, telephoning, etc. But water is certainly a big issue of concern because we are talking about a basic human rights, the human right to clean and safe water. In this context, mining companies play a huge role because they use a lot of water in their operations, but they are not the only sector affecting water. We have seen negative impacts over water resources of dams, of oil companies, of tourist industry, the chemical industry spilling some waste to rivers, etc., etc.
But I mean, surely, particularly when you hear the World Bank or the IMF, when they speak about privatization in Latin America, and particularly in Chile, they're always praising the merits of privatization, that ultimately it's actually for the good of the people. Has privatization in any way worked to serve the goods of poor people?
Certainly there are examples of privatization having increased services of poor people, but we saw in the 90s, after the privatization of the water services, that some of them frankly failed. So in Bolivia, for example, in the year 2000, there was a popular race against the private company there that was there's a US company called Bechtel and a Spanish company there, and the people saw the services failed in the amount of people that were covered, and the prices increased dramatically, 35%. So the poor people, 200,000 people were excluded from the services in Bolivia. They took the streets, and the government had to go back into the privatization and renationalize the water services there.
So do you think that this kind of people power is the only way to confront what at times is the unfairness of these private models?
It is certainly one way. Another way is lawsuits. We've seen an increasing number of lawsuits brought against companies and states when basic human rights are infringed by privatization. But also there is these international arbitration tribunals where cases are brought by private investors when when a company claimed that a state hasn't respected the contract that is signed with the company, then they bring the case against the state in an international arbitration tribunal. And these tribunals increasingly are considering human rights arguments in their decisions. The classic example is the Bywater example in Tanzania, where there was also a dispute over water issues, and Tanzania canceled the contract before the end of the contract with Bywater company, and the tribunal received an amicus curiae brief by a lot of NGOs talking about the basic right to water. And the tribunal considered these arguments and at the end decided against Tanzania, but didn't award the monetary compensation to Bywater.
Okay, now, if we look right now, the one global consensus that's coming out of how we deal with this global recession we're in is through regulation. Whether you listen to Angela Merkel, Germany's Chancellor, or President Obama, they agree on this. This is the one thing they agree on. Can there be a kind of international regulation for access to people's basic rights, such as water, such as land? Is that a possibility?
Well, we think so. There are two main initiatives at the UN level right now on business and human rights. One is the UN Global Compact, which is a purely voluntary initiative gathering 4,000 companies around the world where they subscribe to 10 principles: human rights, labor rights, environmental rights, and corruption, but it's purely a voluntary initiative. The second one is the UN Special Representative for Business and Human Rights, Professor John Ruggie from Harvard. And he has developed a framework to move forward with this issue of business and human rights. We will cover all the work that John Draghi does on our website, and he has developed a framework called Protect, Respect and Remedy. The first pillar, protect, is the state duty to protect human rights also against infringements by third parties, including companies. The second one is respect, the responsibility that companies directly have under international law to respect human rights. And the third one is access to remedies for victims when abuses take place. If this framework is taken forward, we believe that there can be ways to improve this issue in the world in the future. Yeah.
Mauricio La Sala, thank you so much for coming in.
You're welcome.
Now, the airline industry has received a hard blow during this economic crisis, losing billions of dollars. The international air transport industry predicts a grim few years to follow. But despite these hard times, it seems one airline is soaring high. Over to Kuala Lumpur now, where Veronica Pedrosa has more.
Well, the International Air Transport Association's annual general meeting heard that the industry is in survival mode. The IATA's Director General told members he hasn't been presented with any facts that support optimism about a recovery by the end of the year. IATA now says that airline revenue will drop from $528 billion last year to $448 billion, a fall of 15% or $80 billion. This means predicted losses for airlines this year have been revised from $4.7 billion to $9 billion. And airlines here in Asia will be hardest hit. Losses of $3.3 billion are expected in this region alone. This makes the performance of Malaysian-based low-cost carrier AirAsia something of an anomaly. In the first quarter of 2009, its profit rose 26%. In a moment, we'll speak to AirAsia CEO Tony Fernandez. But first, Harry Fawcett takes the pulse of Asia's struggling aviation industry.
It's an unexpected sight, a bird pondering nest building in the cargo area of Kuala Lumpur International Airport. A sign perhaps of just how quiet things have got. As Asia's exports have dried up in the recession, the cargo carrying business has collapsed. According to the International Air Transport Association's most recent figures, across the Asia-Pacific region, April saw a 22.3% drop year-on-year in cargo traffic. It's got quieter too inside the airport, where the figures for human traffic are only slightly better. April's Asia-Pacific passenger numbers were down 8.6%. The airlines have hit economic turbulence before, but this steep, extended drop has them worried.
Well, this downturn's both deeper and more prolonged than what we've experienced in the past. So airlines are having to batten down the hatches, conserve cash wherever they can, and get through this. The test of whether you get through this is largely how your balance sheet stood going into it. And I have to say, many Asian airlines have relatively strong balance sheets and will come through this in good shape. But it's going to be a very, very tough year.
Across the region, indeed around the world, planes are being grounded as routes are cut. Australia's Qantas is removing first class from some of its services. Cathay, Singapore, Malaysia among the airlines getting their staff to take unpaid leave. But so far the reduction in capacity is still being outstripped by falling demand.
The airlines are trying to cut costs and trim capacity as they wait for an upturn in business. But some are saying that this crisis is more than just a temporary blip, that it's a sign of worse things to come for an aging industry in need of a radical redesign.
There is an expectation, I think, that this will blow over reasonably quickly like it has in the past. But meanwhile, what the airlines are doing is just burning the furniture, waiting for things to get better. If this time, because it is going to be prolonged, if they don't do something serious about it, then they're not going to be here when we come out of the recession.
IATA itself is calling on the industry to resize and reshape, to push for more mergers and rely less on government support. But if the recession has left traditional airlines battling for survival, if anything, it's benefiting their low-cost rivals, like Malaysia's AirAsia. Profits and passenger numbers were up more than 20% in the first quarter of this year. It's been scooping up former first and business class passengers as big companies turn to budget carriers to provide their corporate travel. It's grown from a debt-ridden two-plane outfit in 2001 to a major regional carrier, and it's pledging to carry on that expansion this year, even as most of the industry cuts back and waits for a better day. Harry Fawcett, Al Jazeera.
Well, global airlines are forecast to make losses of $9 billion this year. That is double the level forecast just 3 months ago. Asia, we're hearing, will bear the brunt, losing $3.3 billion. But Malaysia's low-budget airline AirAsia is posting its best first quarter results, coming in with a 26% profit increase. How have you managed it?
Well, I think it's an investment that we've made over the last 5 years. We've got an impeccable route network, a very good product, and obviously very low fares. And obviously we're benefiting. People still want to travel. It's whether you can make it affordable enough to travel, and I think we have the product at the right time.
Now, when you say you've made investment in the right places, most airlines, many of the ones meeting here in Kuala Lumpur at the IATA conference, do that on credit. And that has been a real vulnerable point at this time of a credit crunch. What about AirAsia?
Well, I think credit is there. It's a matter of, there's a flight to quality. Where credit was very easy to get, now banks are being choosy about who they're going to give credit to.
So a discount airline is now quality?
Well, I think so, certainly from the financial standpoint, but I also think our product is a good quality. But we've managed to secure financing for all our planes this year and next year.
At the same time, though, 2 weeks ago, we've been hearing about the fact that AirAsia is planning a $143 million rights offer because of your rising debt. So it's not all a pretty picture, is it?
Well, I mean, I think we're very cash positive. We don't need it, but, you know, if cash is available, I'm an old-fashioned guy, we'll always take it. We haven't got anything planned as yet, but certainly it's not an option I'm closed to.
I'm quite interested in hearing you say an old-fashioned guy, because there's been a lot of talk throughout this economic slowdown that we need to get back to the old values of not borrowing beyond your means. Do you think that is part of your philosophy?
Oh, very much. I mean, you know, when we started this airline, I always said cash is king. You can do a P&L however you want, but the bottom line is show me the money. And we've always lived on those principles. I do think people were over-leveraged. I do think there was a huge excess speculation, which really, people didn't go after value, as in creating value, creating goods and services. It was all paper transactions. And I fear that they're still there when you see the rally in oil prices over the last month and a half.
All right, I'm looking at your $143 million rights offering. Should I buy some?
Well, my view is obviously that we're going through a purple phase. You know, all our investment over the last 7 years is now beginning to bear fruit. We took a very contrarian view as to when airlines were cutting back during SARS and now this economic crisis. We have expanded and built a very strong market share. We are now the biggest airline in Malaysia. In fact, in the national airport in KLIA, we are the largest movement of passengers. So I think and we're only 7 years old. We've built this incredible franchise in 7 years, and now I think we're going to reap the benefits of our investment. But we never took a short-term view.
You're making me feel old, because I remember interviewing you 7 years ago when you were in Hong Kong, and we were talking about this kind of upstart company. Look where you are today. But there are problems. I mean, I have been an AirAsia customer in the past, I get emails from you about the condition of the low-cost carrier terminal here. That's been a real problem. There have been a lot of complaints about service from customers. Yeah,
well, we don't own that terminal. That's a myth that everyone thinks we did. It's owned by Malaysian Airports. It has been a sore to us. It has been a sore point. We feel we're being overcharged for inferior facilities. On the positive side, Malaysian Airports have put in another 150 million investment, and by September we will have a completely renovated terminal. And there are plans to build a permanent terminal in 2011. So I think it's in view. It's got a lot better than where it was. As you mentioned, you know, I was taken ill a week ago. I collapsed at that terminal.
That's right.
Maybe it was in my mind that I was still upset about the terminal that I lost my legs.
So you can't pretend that you're not feeling the pressure, but let me get you to look ahead to the future. If people do invest in AirAsia, looking at this rights offering, what are the prospects for AirAsia?
We've been, from day one, been told that we're overextending ourselves.
All right.
You know, it's been because we're just an anomaly to most airlines. We continue to grow, we continue to make money, and everyone says, oh, they're pushing it. But I think, you know, over the next 2 years, we have in a wonderful position. We've really invested well in our academy, training lots of pilots, our culture. We've put all the routes down. We're in 3 great countries. And by 2010, we'll be a completely Airbus fleet. So I'm optimistic. You know, I was so optimistic when our price share price was down that I tried to privatize the company because I believe in it. I put my money where my mouth is. But I think we've never taken a short-term view of things.
Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much for having me.
And you can keep up to date with all the news on our website, aljazeera.net/English, and click on the left-hand side for the business page. And that's it from me, Darren Jordan, this week on Counting the Cost. Thanks for watching.